Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Making Action Happen. I'm Sarah Blackhurst.
And I'm Brian McCain.
Well, we're happy to be back in the studio. It's been a couple of weeks. We were really busy with the annual meeting and getting ready for that. And then everything that's happened after that is all around sort of what I've been learning in the last few weeks. There's been some dramatic, it's that time of year when I really start to look at everything and decide what we need to prepare for the next year. So this last few weeks, I've been looking for what lessons I need to be learning. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, and the annual meeting was awesome. It was kind of like everything we do. It's you play catch up till the end, and then it's like, oh no, nobody's going to show up. Then all of a sudden, everybody shows up at the part of it. But no, it was really good. I think we got a lot out of it. Had excellent speakers. And wonderful sponsors, and the UCCS Cybersecurity Center was awesome, or National Cybersecurity Center.
Yeah.
Everybody got to go on a tour if they wanted to, check out some of the cool stuff they got going on there. And yeah, overall it was a success, I think. Oh,
I thought it was a huge success, and everybody seemed to feel the same way. Even though we didn't have the numbers that we normally have, the venue was unique.
Yeah.
The agenda was just off the charts. And we were really, really pleased. And we had some really, really great sponsors and all that. And Brian will give a shout out to those in just a little bit. And at the end of the show, I'm going to pose a question to you as our listeners. There's a lot of decisions that we're needing to make, that Brian and I are making right now, and that we're making as part of committees or whatever on the whole. So I'm going to pose some questions to you because I frankly need your advice on some of the things that we're working on. So,
and my chair is shrinking right now for anybody watching. It's just slowly going down. But no, I think with the annual meeting, just to go through who kind of made it possible. Obviously UCCS, as we said, they were gracious hosts and sponsors both for the meeting portion and the the reception afterwards. And then Xcel Energy was our main sponsor. So thank you, Xcel. And on top of that, we had CU, IBEW, Black Hills Energy, Pinnacle Workers Comp Insurance, Connect for Health Colorado, Comcast NBC Universal, Much Government Relations, AT&T, Project EOS, and Adam Frisch for Congress. So they were all wonderful sponsors, and they got to show off what they're doing and how they're improving the community and their fun projects they have upcoming. Project EOS was a good one because that's the carbon capture people that partnered with Department of Energy, School of Mines, and they're doing a study in Pueblo, 3-year study, and they'll come on the show and talk more about that.
No, these guys are really great, and it's really interesting. And a lot of things that we didn't know about. One of my favorites, of course, was Adam Frisch and the presentation that he gave. It was just so refreshingly honest.
Yeah, and he was,
I think it blew our hair back.
And he was, we're a nonpartisan organization, and he was very straight to the point. So there was no politicking going on during it.
Right.
Even he said there were a few questions asked of him, and he's like, I'm not here to talk about my campaign, not here to talk about politics. This is just what I'm really researching. And it was in the energy field and common sense solutions. And, we'll have him back on the podcast, but it's nothing that you haven't heard already. And if you want to see it, you could go to our YouTube channel or our website. It's on there. And just, if you go to Making Action Happen for YouTube, it'll pop up and you could watch it. And it's all chaptered, so you could go directly to what you want to see in that whole presentation.
Also, if you get the Action 22 emails, it's laid out there. The links are laid out there. And one of my favorite things, honestly, about Adam Frisch is how he honors and respects that we're nonpartisan and that we try to stay nonpartisan and stay focused on the issues. The other one that was a big hit, the other conversation that was a big hit, honestly, was yours, Brian.
Yeah, it was about the lack of media coverage for Southern Colorado and kind of a plan to grow that and build a network for information, similar to what we do now, just on a larger scale and partnering with the communities, local radio, local media, local print media, and even the larger ones, maybe if we get to that point. But to provide that information network specifically going into the legislative session about what's happening, who to contact, how this will impact you, because we don't have that coverage anymore. And I know during the presentation, I kind of bagged on the chieftain a little bit. But it's just the way of the world right now. So they are severely downsized compared to what they used to be. I think in it, I found they have 6 employees or 6 reporters versus, over 100 employees in the past. They're not printing out of Pueblo anymore. Even the journalists that are still there don't have offices. So there's no, what do you call it when you're at a newspaper and there's where all the reporters hang out? Is that the bullpen?
Oh, the bullpen.
The bullpen. So there's no bullpen for them to really bounce ideas off of each other, I think. And I get it. Post-COVID, everything's online and Zoom meetings and all that fun stuff. But it basically went from the main source of information for Southern Colorado based out of Pueblo to nothing. They cover some things, but it's not like it used to be. And when Bob Rawlings owned the Chieftain, his biggest push on coverage was water. And it wasn't water for Pueblo, although he, dipped his toe in that water a little bit, but it was mostly for the valley and the ag workers of Southern Colorado and the rural parts. And after he passed away, that attention to water really went away. And I think regardless of who owns the Chieftain now or, who they would be owned by, that was him pushing that, I don't want to say agenda, but that coverage and educating the people about what's happening. And we don't have that anymore. So my presentation was how can we step up and kind of partner with each other to provide that coverage. And again, we're not reporters, but this is the age of new media or, not normal mainstream media. There's a term for it, but that was my presentation. How can we do that? How can we provide this network? How can we expand in Southern Colorado? And how can we be a source of information on everything that impacts us down here?
So that led to a couple other things. So leading up to the annual meeting, of course, I had also committed to moderating the mayoral and city council debates. So we did something that's a little bit
for Pueblo.
For Pueblo, sorry, yes,
Pueblo
I'm sorry.
mayoral.
For Pueblo, the mayoral stuff, city council stuff for Pueblo. So we did something that we actually do a lot, but not in a really constructed way. So there was a lot of, we kind of just thought about what needs to happen and everybody, including the chieftain, they're restructuring for a new world. So 23 has really been the first year that everybody's really truly emerging, I think, from the pandemic. And so, I think everybody's on a learning curve and just trying to adapt, and survive in the adaptation. But, we asked a lot of questions leading up to that, both on what did we want to talk about at the annual meeting, but also where people sort of were and what they were most concerned about, as we were asking what they would like to know from a mayor. I think between, I just did a quick little count between who you talked to, who I talked to, who Dwayne talked to, or what we got feedback from or answers. Between the three of us, there was about 120 plus people that we connected with, between the three of us. And when I say Dwayne, I mean Dwayne Nava, who's the head of the chamber, as far as what people were talking about. What sort of rang out to me in those discussions, and then what the feedback that we got after your presentation was that we need to do a better job of not only listening but bringing people in, and so that's why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. So we're having a lot more conversations, and we've gotten out quite a bit since then. So.
And the chieftain, after the debates, they released where does each candidate stand on the issues, and their questions were actually pretty similar to the ones that you asked. They asked, introduce yourself, why are you qualified to be mayor, which I believe that was one of them. If elected, what would you do on day one? Yeah. They asked, what would be your approach for addressing homelessness? What role should the city government have? They said, how would you handle police staffing shortages? Aside from hiring additional police officers, what would you do to reduce crime in Pueblo, which is kind of at the top of everybody's mind right now? Right. What plan do you have for creating affordable home ownership instead of renting for Puebloans? And this year, the interactions between city council and the mayor have been tense at times. As mayor, how would you work together? And how would you approach improving transportation infrastructure within the city? And what would you do to help the city achieve the goal of 100% renewable energy by 2035? And finally, this is a local ballot one. I mean, this is all local, but do you support ballot measure 2A, which would raise the city's lodging tax to help pay for childcare? And that's questions the chieftain asked. And similar to ours, it was just tougher. They have the ability to send those out and get the response or whatever. You operated on a time crunch, which is really interesting, trying to get 9. Were there 9 up there?
There were 9 up there.
9 people in 2 hours?
Yeah, a little bit. So even a little bit less. We dramatically cut back the time. Otherwise, we would have been like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
So we really had to get as much time for each of the candidates as we can. It was really interesting. Without fail, and I can't say this about Dwayne, but without fail for you and I, every single person that we talked to or interacted with, the very first thing that they said to us was about crime and homelessness. That was the number one, far and away. And then anything else that we asked them or anything else that we kind of had to feed them. Like, what else are you worried about? But we didn't have to ask about crime and homelessness.
No, that was everybody that I spoke with. It's like, what would you ask the mayor? And it's like, what are you doing about crime and homelessness or crime? That was number one on everybody's mind. And I think that's really across the board even. And it's kind of a, excuse, shoddy excuse. Because some of the mayoral candidates say, hey, crime's bad everywhere. It's not just Pueblo. But I think that's a cop-out because, you could say crime's bad in Denver or a bigger city or Colorado Springs. But in reality, there's more chance for control to do something about it in Pueblo. We're not a city of 1 million people or a county of 1 million.
Right.
And we're a municipality that just the Pueblo mayor, because you don't see as much of that. And I talked to somebody about that. So when you get outside of Pueblo City, Pueblo West, the county, Rye, Colorado City, these areas, like the crime's not the same or the homelessness is not the same. And they're little bubbles and they can control it a little better. But I think that the mayor and city council in the city, they have an opportunity to do something more impactful with it than, say, Denver does.
Right. I agree.
There's a lot of people in Denver and that's tough, but Pueblo, there's not a lot of people. How many people are in the city? Like around 80,000?
Yeah, it's close to 100,000, but countywide it's 150,000. So
it's less than 100,000 in the city. So that's manageable to actually do something and see an impact.
And the truth is we talk about degrees of separation. There's not more than 1 degree of separation between anybody in Pueblo. So we often go, do you know this person? Do you know, like you'll say that you and I say this to each other. Do we know this person? Do we know this person? We know this person? If we don't know them, then we know somebody who knows them.
Did anybody, and I didn't really watch the mayor stuff. I watched some of it.
You were a little busy.
I was busy, but I didn't go back and watch it. Did anybody provide an actual solution when you talked to them or when they answered?
No, it was, I really didn't feel like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've got the most feedback on, honestly, was because it came up a lot in our discussions prior to the debate. And so there was one question about this for both the city council and the mayoral stuff, and that was about the needle exchange.
Yeah, that's a hot topic. I mean, we've had Epi on. We've had
Epi on. I'm not going to unpack that.
Yeah.
But it was sort of, and these guys knew what we were, the general idea of what we were going to talk about. But there were no solutions except for maybe a little bit of one from Randy Thurston. Heather Graham was really strong on this issue as well, I thought. And she was endorsed by the police department.
Yes, the police union.
And then Nick Gradishar's answer was that, that he's already doing everything. Yeah. And then I think it was Larry Atencio who said, well, actually crime is going down. So, and then
that's kind of,
so I think
I think reported crime is going
exactly.
down.
That was sort of what I wanted to scream.
Yeah.
Is it really going down, or is the reporting going down?
Yeah.
Because all of us know of crimes that just don't get reported. I mean, we can
I've
personally
read it
to ourselves.
and I've seen it and I've heard it from people that work in law enforcement. They're like, no, it's reported crime that's going down. And the reason to take this outside of Pueblo, since I don't want to just talk about Pueblo with this, but the reason why I think it's important to talk about it with Pueblo is because we can create the model, because we hear from La Junta, they're dealing with it. Trinidad, Marico,
Canyon City,
all these communities that are around Pueblo, we could be the model for that. And it's kind of like it trickles down like, well, this is what's working in Pueblo. And then the other side of it too, we hear about people that are leaving Pueblo and going to these other communities now. We
recently heard of a family member of somebody that we're close to actually moving to Denver because the crime was getting so bad in Pueblo. And I thought, that's insane to me. Yeah, that it's like that, and we get that it's
only if you
relative.
can afford like a good neighborhood in Denver. Now, maybe not live downtown, but there's some nice areas around Denver where they don't have any problems whatsoever. But they also have gated communities up there, private security, this type of thing. We don't have any of that in Pueblo. I think we have like gated apartment complexes, but that's the closest thing. And those are security more than we want to keep the riffraff out. So it was just really interesting when we stopped and we spent more time talking to people than we were talking to elected officials. I learned a lot. It really changed my perception. Just having those conversations on a lot of things. I mean, maybe not my perception, but really the way our perception of the perception, if that makes any sense, like how we look at these things. Yeah, and in all fairness, like even if crime's going down, the perception is that crime is not going down and homelessness is not going down. And perception is reality, especially when you get into politics and elections. Our focus determines our reality. Yep. So I have spent most of my time since the annual meeting outside of Pueblo. So I got to tell you about a couple of really cool things that have been bright spots. Micah and I went down to Monte Vista. So, or Monty, as anybody from the Valley would call it. And got to meet with one of our favorite people, Gigi Dennis. Guillermo Labari from AT&T was going down. And you'll remember that we've talked about that we were working on broadband through a digital equity lens last year down there. And one of the things that we really felt strongly about with regard to that project is the digital literacy is one of the big gaps, but also having access to devices. Yep. Was a really big gap. So most people under the age of 50 are operating a lot on their phones if they don't have devices. But just having a laptop can make a huge difference for people. So during that project last year, we gave out 200 devices as a gift from AT&T. But after we were done with that project, AT&T had made and Guillermo had made a really strong connection and commitment to Monte Vista and to Gigi Dennis and some of the projects down there. So we went over to the Monte Vista Alternative High School, which is a really well thought out program. It wasn't separate from the rest of it was on the same campus as their school, and they have a K through 12 campus there. And it was really designed for alternative learners that had just not thrived and had tried everything else. And it's a beautiful it was a high school, several decades back, and then it was administrative building, and now it's for this alternative high school. And they just do a really, really great job. And they have a pretty impressive graduation rate out of of that school. Most of their kids that go into that, or most of their students that go into that, I think it was around 70% graduation rate,
for an alternative school. So we were really impressed with them and the superintendent and all of them down there. So they gave out a bunch of laptops there. The other thing that was a need that was a passion project of Gigi Genis was to have an after-school program called the Monte Vista Kid Connections. And AT&T gave them a very generous gift to help them keep their doors open and do the things that they needed to do, of $35,000. What's really great about AT&T's gifts is they say, here's what the gift, what do you need? This is what we can give you.
Yep.
And then they don't have any strings attached.
Yeah.
And they don't say, well, you have to use it, like laptops, you give them to who you think needs, and there are no strings attached. The money, you do what you need to do. That was really cool. In the meantime, I had been asked to sit on the steering committee or the search committee for the new chancellor of UCCS, which I was deeply, Todd Salomon texted me late on a Sunday, which I knew that he was really trying to work hard on that. I was deeply honored to be able to sit on that committee. But one of the reasons that this is so important right now is higher ed in our region is in a very transitional place right now.
Yes.
There's been, so right now what we're talking about in about a 12 to 18 month period is that we have a remarkable turnover on the leadership, the presidents, chancellors, and so forth. So we have a new chancellor, or new president at Lamar Community College, new president at Otero Community College. Patty Erjavik announced that she'd be leaving PCC in May. We have a new president at Adams State. We have a new president they'll be announcing within the next week or so who the new president of CSUP is. Of course, there's a relatively new president of CSU. Mm-hmm. Todd Salomon's been in there for a couple of years, but he's relatively new. They're going to have a new chancellor at UCCS, a new chancellor of CU Boulder, and Todd Salomon was telling me the other day that there's a new president at Western State.
Yeah.
That is incredible turnover. So there's the landscape of higher ed is really in a very sort of I don't want to say growth, but adaption phase right this minute, really questioning the where's, the why's, the how's. And so I learned a ton there. And I have to tell you, it was, last I heard, it was a little intimidating. I was a little starstruck, honestly, by some of the candidates, the incredible caliber of what got brought in. I have to tell you, and I can't tell you any more than this, there were a total of 93 candidates or 93 applications all told that this search committee of I think 16 or so had to whittle down to a very short list to give to Todd. I was exhausted.
Yeah, it is exhausting.
I got a migraine the last night and stayed an extra night there up there just so I wouldn't have to drive. But before I did this, I've got to tell you one more thing. And this is not all that we've done, but this is one of the other things, highlights that I did in the last couple of weeks since the annual meeting. Lockheed Martin. So of course our favorite space cowboy, Chad Vorthman, set up a tour for the friends and family of the Colorado Farm Bureau at Lockheed Martin. And I got to do that this last week. Holy cow. I didn't know it. I didn't know. And everybody sort of knows the mystique and the impressiveness of Lockheed Martin, but I really didn't know or understand. So, Chad is really on a mission to very much share what he can of what's going on there. And it's much more than you think. And of course, the other thing that we're having a lot of conversations about right now is all around energy. So we're talking about broadband a lot, but we're talking about energy. And of course, I'm the vice chair for Coloradans for Energy Access, which is really trying to help advocate for this gap, this transition period that we're going through, which is very difficult. But I'm also, of course, on the committee to give a recommendation for what should happen with Comanche 3 in Pueblo.
That's a big one. That's on everybody's mind right now, whether you are pro 100% renewable energy or you want to dig coal mines. It's the number one issue in Pueblo. It's a funding issue. It's a tax issue. It's an energy issue, which, it's kind of funny. And I had to explain this to a few people. I was like, why do we care? Like, we don't get power from here. They don't power Pueblo. They do Evraz. And I always have to remind people, like, no, their biggest customer is Evraz, which employs a lot of people here in town. But you have to explain the dynamic of why power is generated in certain areas and sent to other ones. But it's not necessarily an affordable energy issue. Like, it's not, our rates aren't set from Comanche right now. They are roundaboutly, but the energy that what replaces Comanche does not impact really the energy in Pueblo, the energy usage. But what it does impact is schools and budgets and tax base and this sort of thing. And that's where, this discussion is very important. And I don't think the average person here or in the region understands that dynamic.
They don't. And I think it goes back to, in part, that the media desert that we keep running into. So you do this for your mom's friends, and I do this for my mom's friends, and because they always want to ask us. They don't quite understand a ballot, or they don't quite understand what some of the nuances, and elections matter. And I've been saying it for the last couple months, but elections really matter right now. What the decisions that are made on every level, from the voter all the way up, in the next 14 months will really genuinely determine what our region, our communities, our region, our state, and our country will look like for the next 20 years. That's just my opinion, because we're right. So when you think about this sort of nexus that we're at with education, with energy, with economic development, with really our place in the world, broadband, I don't know, what else we're talking about, water, all these things that we're talking about, all those decisions, we're in the final minutes for making decisions that are really going to make the difference. And we get to decide what that's going to look like. And so we have discussions with with our mom's friends. They ask us, tell us about this or that, or they'll ask us about, help me understand this. And so around election time, we sit down with our mom's friends and we tell them these things. Yeah. What struck me, I had this conversation yesterday at a lovely woman's house by the name of Joy Marostica, and she looked at me, and she's very well read, and she's been on this earth for 92 years, and she really tries to keep on top of everything. And what she looked at me and she just said, I had no idea what I didn't know. And they were all of them were like, you've got to tell us more. You've got to do this more, where you're having these conversations more. But it's really hard.
It is, which kind of goes into two of the propositions that are on the ballot right now. Prop II, I think Action 22 was neutral on it.
We were neutral on this.
And that was just because nobody responded. But honestly, I've been telling everybody, like, look, basically they said, hey, we're going to tax nicotine and tobacco products to pay for it's preschool, right? Early childhood development.
Early childhood development. But they have to put a number on it. So we project that that'll be about $12 million or whatever the number was. Well, turns out a lot of people like tobacco in Colorado, and it was something, it was something like $37 million. So what Prop II does is they have to have the voters' approval to use that surplus money. More money was generated on the taxes to send it to the early childhood development. Now, if they don't, they have to send it back to the tobacco companies. It's not going back to the citizens of Colorado or anything like that. I think that's the part that we all sort of miss. So Michael Cook, where we did Action 22 did take a neutral position, and it was just because nobody was really knew what to say about it. But that's a big deal.
I say, like, you should vote yes on that. Like, Prop I, like, please vote yes on that, because that's a chunk of change that'll go to children. And if it doesn't go to them, then it's going to go back to the tobacco company.
In
fact, we had on our annual meeting, you could go and see that part of it too. We didn't have anybody show up in opposition. It was basically, Michael, like, just getting up there and saying, this is why we support it and this is why you should support it. Nobody opposed it. There wasn't even any questions on it.
Yeah.
But then we get to the Prop HH, which Action 22 is adamantly opposed to.
But we have to, let me set this up a little bit, and then you can go into all the whys, Bren. But it was really important to us because, of course, being nonpartisan is really important. And this has turned into another very partisan issue. So what we did is we invited opposition and proponents to come and present at our annual meeting. We told them that we would share that, but the Action 22 board would not take a position until after that discussion happened. So this was a very fair, you talk about it. And the board adamantly opposed it. And we had one person that I was kind of surprised that came and said that they actually supported it. Only one of our board members actually supported it. And then he called me back later and said, I did not read the whole thing. That was my bad. He wasn't at the annual meeting. He didn't read the whole thing. He said, I want to change my vote. I now adamantly oppose HH.
Yeah, and I think there was one or two that didn't take a stance on it just because their organization hadn't gone through it yet. So they couldn't, they didn't want to misrepresent the organization. But yeah, we're opposed to it. And you could see that debate or presentation, whatever you want to call it, on our YouTube, just Making Action Happen. And it's marked there so you could jump directly to it. But multiple reasons why we're opposed to it. I think the biggest one is, this is verbatim from what Sarah sent out. This is a tremendous policy shift, one which should have been carefully considered with the robust stakeholder process. Instead, it was introduced in the final minutes, literally, of the session. So that was the biggest one. They were voting on that, and we had Senator Kirkmeyer and Representative Puglisi up there, and they were like, we didn't even get a chance to read this before we voted on it, because it was in the last 24 hours, wasn't it?
It was in the last hour and a half of session. So it was like the last hour and a half of session. And it was interesting because everybody was distracted on the fight of the land use thing, and they're like, whoop, there you go. Everybody was like up in arms over 213. Yes.
And then they just snuck it in right after that.
So it has to be introduced on one floor. This is how the bills work. It has to be introduced on one floor, then it has to go to committee, then it has to be introduced on the next floor. If there's no changes, then it goes back, it's fine. Yeah. If there's some changes on the second floor, or it doesn't get out of the committee, or there's amendments or whatever, so it has to go through that process. So there's normally a really strict, here's what it is, but it was introduced on one floor in committee, and back at on the other floor and out with minutes on the clock.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a long list. And again, you can find this on our website. Even if you go to the blog section, this is up there. But I think that's the one that bothered a lot of people the most, was that it was just thrown out there right at the last minute and kind of rushed through. And then on the flip side of it, is it 50 or 55? I think it's 50, just got approved to be on the ballot next year, which changes everything again with property tax.
It does. So Wednesday afternoon, the Republicans asked the governor for a special session. And so I'm not going to comment on that. I'm just going to say that's what happened. Yeah. I don't believe that the governor will acquiesce to that request. But I think that's an important part to note.
And a lot of our county and city managers and commissioners, they have a lot of concerns with this. And this is the rural part of the state. I don't know how Denver, even El Paso County is against it, right? The county commissioners.
Yeah, that was sort of the thing. I think that a lot of, and when you read some of the articles and stuff, Marianne Goodland put out a really good article, and that sort of unpacks several things. But one of the things that the lingering questions, why so many of the local governments and the municipalities and counties have adamantly opposed this, when on the surface it looks like it would help them.
Yes,
but why? That's the question that I wish somebody would pose and then really be brave enough to answer.
Well, and part of it too, and from some of them that I've talked to, they said it's just they're going to have to hire more people, and they're on a shoestring budget where they're cutting hours or understaffed because they can't pay them. And if this passes, like that alone with it, get rid of everything else in it. Get rid of the details, how it's going to work, because that's another issue. We were talking about budgeting. It's like we don't know how to budget out next year. But the big one, I think, and you hear it, and with anything that changes a statute or compliance issues, it's a burden on the business or the local government where they're going to have to hire more people, and they're barely breaking even on their budget, if breaking even at all. So how can they afford to bring in 2 more employees or 3 more employees just to process this?
And they have to have to get permission to finance anything. So counties and municipalities have to get permission from the voters to finance anything. So that's part of it. And you can't get financing for general operations. So that's why that's difficult. The other one was that there was a bill that was passed this last session that would give the powers to the counties to do what HH would do, and then the counties could then themselves decide if that was something that was feasible for them,
and that was Senate Bill 108.
And to what degree.
Yeah, Senate Bill 108. Yeah, that one gives them a little more control on that to provide the relief.
Yeah.
But the funny one, and they talk about it in the debate or whatever, the presentation was, it allows that portability of the senior homes, senior property tax exemption. What is it? Is it it's the senior and veteran property tax exemption. Yes. So basically, if you sell your house or you move, you don't get that exemption right now. It doesn't move with you.
You have to have your house for 10 years before you get that.
Yes. But in Prop HH, it allows you to do that. But at the same time, there have been multiple bills that were supposed to allow people to do that, and they get voted down. They haven't passed.
Yeah. So it's, and one of the things I didn't list that, because I really took from what the feedback that we got from our board, that was one of the things. So I didn't put a lot of other, personal thoughts, but one of my thoughts, that I thought was very strange about this was, not just that there was a lack of stakeholdering on this, which is a growing concern, especially when you're making these kinds of dramatic changes.
As anybody knows that listens to this show.
As everybody knows, it's a little pet peeve of mine. But the other part was this idea that we're not supposed to have on ballot measures multiple lines.
Yes.
And there's a really good reason for that.
And this was challenged, but it didn't.
But it's challenged, but it was ignored. And I can't understand that. I can't understand why that was.
Well, I mean, I could talk a little bit more about it, but since we're opposed to it officially, I think this is the one, going back to that portability exemption. They just did that to make a commercial. It's like, hey, do you want to move? Do you want your parents to move, or do you want your veteran to move? Well, now they get that exemption with them. So vote yes on this. And the way it's on the ballot, the Blue Book actually did the Blue Book description on the opposition really did some more harm than I thought. Like, good for the opposition, but harm for Prop HH, because it straight up says in the Blue Book that your Tabor is going to go down. And if you listen to the advocates for it, they're saying, no, your Tabor refund's not going to go down. But in the Blue Book, it says it is. And I was confused at that, because the proponents of it said, no, it's not going to decrease your Tabor. In fact, your Tabor is going to go up next year. Yeah. Your Tabor refund is what we're talking about. But in the Blue Book, it says it's going to go down.
So I think that's one of the things that really, it was sort of we're going to, one modeling idea, or one idea was this and one idea was that. The problem is that there was no modeling for this. There was no stakeholdering for this. and it is a dramatic change. But also, there's so many different things that you're trying to decide with one ballot measure. I can't understand how that got through.
And another concern that I have not heard anybody ask, they said, this is statute, right? So it changes the color out of statute. Mm-hmm. So once it's in statute, the legislature could go back and change it.
Of course.
So they can adjust it. So
and they've done that. They've done that on the regular.
So
right?
They could basically strip Tabor. They could say, hey, it's not enough money. We got to take all the Tabor.
So, and the way they have done that in the past is they say, okay, this is clearly what they want. So now we're going to create legislation to sort of plug the holes.
And the opponents of it say that this is basically just a backdoor way to kill Tabor. And
I think there can be a strong argument made for that.
Proponents say it's not going to impact Tabor that much. It is going to a little bit, but the Blue Book says it's going to a little bit more. But if they get to a point when they're saying that we don't have enough money to backfill from Tabor, we could just change it where we can take more Tabor.
Correct.
And then they could say we could just take all Tabor. Like in theory, they could be like, all right, we need all the Tabor money to go back to this.
And
not saying they will, but the door's open. Like they can change it without going to the ballot.
That's the key right there, is without going to the ballot. And so Now
here's the funny thing though. So large businesses, they're going to save a ton of money if this passes, like millions. So that's interesting too, because this is more, the Republicans are opposed to it, but large business is either neutral or for it at the same time. And a lot of that kind of crosses over. You have more of the Republican side of the aisle, working in these larger business industries, or people that vote more, I should say conservative. I shouldn't say Republican because it's taxes and regulations, like big business as opposed to higher taxes and more regulations. But on the flip side, Prop HH, it will save some of these corporations like millions over years.
Interesting.
There's a few that I've heard from, and they're afraid to say anything about it because in their mind they're like,
they don't want to bring
to this.
Yeah, they don't want to bring
like I'm opposed to this, but if this does pass, like we're going to save $17 million over 5 years.
So I guess that sort of brings it back to my point, is that the intent is to give relief, right? The original intent was to give relief, because everybody's assessments have gone up dramatically.
Yes.
Ours included, yours included, every single person I know. There's
$500 more a month in my house payment. That's how much it's gone up.
I don't know. I haven't looked yet, but it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt.
Well, do you own your house, or you're paying a mortgage, right?
I'm paying a mortgage.
Payment. So my mortgage payment this year went up. So it went up $500. Like my monthly mortgage payment increased by $500, or house payment. So that, property tax and all that stuff. That's how much.
That's a
up.
lot.
Yeah. Now, mind you, I got my house for a really good price.
So
5 years ago, but
we did as well. But the assessed value went up more than what we originally paid for the house.
Yes, my assessed value went up more than what I paid for my house. I mean, it went up a lot more than what I paid for my house.
Yeah.
Like it added $200,000 in value on my house.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all definitely need some relief from that. Mm-hmm. But when you say, by the way, this is really big and this is happening. Yeah, we better try to get some relief, but let's do it in the final minutes and let's make really dramatic changes without really actually having a conversation with anybody about it.
And I know, so Mike Beasley, he doesn't think this will pass. I said, I think this will pass. But the more people I talk to about it, I don't think it'll pass. But the way that it's written on the ballot, it depends on how read in the voters are on this and who's voting, because this is an off-year election. But initially looking at it, it's like everybody's hit by this property tax. And the second they see relief from high property taxes.
Right.
I'm going to vote yes on this.
They're going to vote yes. And
but
then
in the long run, it's going to cost them more money.
It's going to cost them a lot more. So either way, so here's what will happen. This is the book of Sarah. What will happen is if it passes, we're going to spend the next couple years trying to figure out what all the effects are.
But if it passes, I guarantee Prop 50 will pass next year.
Right.
Which completely negates Prop HH, but it's still in statute. And then what do they do?
So what they'll do is if
Prop 50 is a cap on property tax, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's something to do with that.
It's like a growth cap on property tax, something like that.
I haven't done a deep dive on it yet.
But it's going to be on the ballot. That's official.
It's official. It's going to be on the ballot. And so that I even paused a little bit by sending out our position on HH. Because I did a lot of homework on that. Yeah. But what will happen is if it doesn't pass, and with 50 being on the ballot, then you're going to see a whole block of legislation this next session that will try to capture components of HH.
Yes, yeah. Which we're already going to see with the land use bill anyway, like 5 separate bills.
We are. There's going to be a lot of bills. And I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to dive into this yet because we don't know what some of that's going to go out. But the other block that we all need to be and that we're bird dogging right now is around trying to make some corrections or trying to make some clarifications on broadband.
Yep, that's money. Another big one.
That's another one we work on a bunch.
So coming up, we'll have a guest on next week. I don't know who yet, but we're going to have somebody else come on, so you don't have to listen to us rant and rave. But after that,
Brian, I'd love to listen to you rant and rave.
After that, it's Veterans Day, so
it is.
Yep, we did the one armed skydiver for that, and then I got to find a veteran for after Veterans Day, and it's kind of cool because Veterans Day is on Saturday this year, so the parade's actually on Saturday.
Yes.
On Veterans Day, usually they do it, like Veterans Day is a day during the week, but they do it on the weekend. So we have a lot of cool stuff in Pueblo. We have a lot of cool stuff in the Valley. La Junta, Colorado Springs is insane when it comes to Veterans Day stuff. But
Get out there.
I know in Pueblo, we're going to do the parade in the morning, which I still think it's like one of the largest Veterans Day parades in the state. Avondale did theirs last month. It's coming back. That used to be the second largest one in the state. And they took a break with COVID and unfortunately, some people passed away that used to run that. But after the Veterans Day parade, if you go down to the Veterans Bridge at the Riverwalk, we're doing a whole veteran celebration with speakers. They're going to have food and music. No, I am not speaking this year.
This is like the first time in a while.
I didn't want to.
Yeah.
But it's going to be fun. So all the veteran service organizations will be out there, and it's just
Paul
going to be a good
Hendrickson and his team have been working really, really hard.
And CSU Pueblo, CSUP is doing something. American Legion hosts too. It's Veterans Day.
But we'll be down there. So we will be down there. So come see Brian.
What if we set this up down there and interview people?
Oh, let's do that.
Let's do that.
So we'll do that. But I have to tell you one more thing before we sign off. I kind of got what are you going to do for the Halloween? Because we always do a Halloween one, and we didn't do a Halloween one this year. We may have to come back
we could do that next week. We could actually do it on Halloween. So it'll come out after Halloween. Which it usually comes out right before or right after.
Yeah.
So let's do a Halloween episode.
We'll do a Halloween episode, and then we'll do that. Okay, so here's my question for you before we sign off. And I really do need your advice because we've been in these discussions. We've been getting a lot of information. I've been doing a lot of research, having a lot of discussions. What do you think is the right answer for energy for our region? We've got a lot of opinions, but really I need to know what's affecting you and what you exactly think. So email me that answer.
And put it like this: is 100% renewable energy the number one priority for you? Is it energy affordability? Is that the priority for you? Is it a smooth transition to renewable energy? Like when you think energy, you think keeping your lights on and your house warm. What's most important? Is it renewable energy, or is it the cost of energy?
Right.
How much the cost impacts you.
Thank you, Brian, for that. So what matters most to you? Is it clean? Is it the cost? Is it somewhere in between? Because we really do need to understand this better if we're gonna stand up for you, in a more effective way. Chad Vorthman, I know you're listening, so I want to know. We'd like to have you on sometime soon to talk a little bit about some of the things that, whatever you can talk about, some of the really cool things that Lockheed Martin is doing. It's awesome. I'm especially interested in their firefighting stuff that they're doing.
Yes, they do a lot with that.
It was really, really cool. So,
and action. It's that part of it. Making action happen. Action 22 does not support or endorse candidates, but we support our members. So if you're a candidate and a member of Action 22, please come on Making Action Happen and tell us what you're about. Also, the views and opinions on Making Action Happen do not necessarily affect or represent the views and opinions of Action 22, its board, or its members. Except for Prop HH. We're against that, and Action 22 is against that.
We're against that. But please remember, elections matter. Please ask all the questions until you're satisfied with the answer. But most importantly, please send that ballot in and vote. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.